Hello and welcome back to the Marley Bird Garter Stitch Knit Along. You have completed section 1 and it's time to jump into section 2. Why don't we take a look at what we have so far? As you look down here, you can see the original shawl that I showed you guys in section 1, done by my contract knitter, Jenny Casaneda. And if you remember, we started down here. Let me scoot this down so you can actually see. We started down here at the very tip with our cast on of 4 stitches, and then with our increases along the wingspan and down the center spine, this little piece has grown enough that this is what you should have so far. You should have a section of color A, 2 rows of color B, a section of color C, 2 rows of color B, and a section of color A. You finished up with a 2 rows of color B again. I'm going to move this shawl aside and I'm going to bring in the one I was working on along with you guys, and I'm going to stretch it out the best I can. It is on my size 24 needles still, and I'm going to switch it over to my longer needles here in a minute, but I want you to see what's going on. How about I show you the right side first? If we look up here at the top, you can see this is where I began. Here is my stitch marker to signify the right side of my work. And then I increased every single row along my wingspan with knit front and backs. And I increased every other right side row down the center again with knit front and backs. And I knew when to increase as far as the placement because of my stitch markers. Remember, I have stitch markers in the center, and then I have stitch markers on the outside to remind me where to increase for that as well. So let's talk a little bit about the needles at this point. If you remember in the very introduction video, I talked to you guys about needing 2 sets of needles, and that if you could only get 1 set of needle, getting the longer ones was the most important. And this is the reason why. As you take a look at the shawl, as I'm working on the size 24 length needle, you can see that my stitches are really starting to get squished up. And I haven't even gotten to the point where I have so many stitches on the needle, right? I'm going to have over 300 stitches on the needle at one point. And this is only 155. So you can already see that this is going to get super squished. That's why it's so important that you have a longer needle, okay? I will say again that if this is all you can find of 24 inch, that's fine. You know, it is what it is. You'll make it work, but it's just so much easier and much more enjoyable to knit when your stitches aren't so squished together. So at this point in the pattern is where I'm going to suggest that we begin to start working on our longer needles as we move into section 2, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. Section 2 of the Garter Stitch Knit Along is actually some stripes that are created with stockinette and garter stitch. So the entire shawl is not done with garter stitch. We do throw in some purling, and we do it in this section so that we create some stockinette in between some garter ridges, and then we will throw in some purling when we do the next section, but I'm not going to talk about that one yet. When we do this section, the reason I threw in a row of purling is, again, so that I get stockinette in between some garter ridges, and you're going to see that that's what's happening. Why don't I go ahead, I'm going to move this aside, and let's pull in that shawl once again that Jenny made. I'm going to put this up here, and let's take a look at the shawl. You can see here on the shawl that we finished off with this section right here. We finished off section 1 with these 2 rows using color B, and then we jump in using color C, and then we alternate 2 rows of color C, 2 rows of color A, 2 rows of color C, 2 rows of color A, 2 of C, 2 of A, 2 of C, 2 of A, 2 of C, and then it goes to 2 rows of color B. To me, in my mind, that makes this a mini section within the section. So this is like, okay, whew, that was one big long kind of mini section repeat, and I'm gonna have a total of 3 of those. So there's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. So you have 3 mini sections within this one section. And quite honestly, those of you out there who are slower knitters, you're probably freaking out like, I'm never going to get all of that knitting and a row of purling done before the whole week is up. And I'm going to tell you that you absolutely can. And if you break it down to doing at least 9 rows a day, okay? 9 rows a day. You can absolutely complete this entire section by the time the next video comes out for section 3, okay? So 9 rows a day, wherever you can get them. Maybe it's an hour in the morning, you work over your lunchtime, and then you finish it up with whatever you can do at night, okay? So you can do this section. And if I break it down in my own head as mini sections within the section, that really helps me feel like I can really take a bite out of this that's actually chewable. Does that make sense? I really hope it does. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you how to go ahead and jump in and start this stripe section, and we're going to change needles. It's not scary, it's really easy. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to bring back in my sample that I've been working on. Now you can see here in the sample I've been working on, just like I taught you guys, I've been cutting my yarn at the end where it was time to do my color changes all the way along. Now what's really great is when we start to move on to this next section, you don't have to cut your yarn as often as you might think because we're changing colors every 2 rows. We're actually going to carry the yarn up along the side. So let me start off here by showing you how to go ahead and jump in and change needles. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in a smaller swatch to actually show you how to do all of the stitches on, okay? So right here I have my size 24 needles and I'm pulling in my longer needles. Now I am using 36 length needles. If you cannot find 36 length, but maybe you found 40 or 47, that's totally okay too. Anything that's longer, that's going to allow you to have more room for stitches. That's what you want at this point. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my work, putting it into my left hand, just like I normally would when I'm knitting, and I'm going to grab my next color. So my next color for this pattern is my color C. So I'm grabbing my color C, and like I told you guys before, I like to tie my new color around my old color. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, knowing that I will go back and untie this knot before I weave in my ends. I just like to have that there to really hold it steady and in place. So go ahead and I'm going to start off my pattern, but instead of holding the opposite end of this 24-inch needle, I'm holding the end of my 36-inch needle in my right hand because I'm going to knit off of this needle onto this needle, and we're going to follow the pattern. So I have the right side facing me. I'm on row 1, starting my stripes pattern. So I go ahead and I knit my first stitch, and let's knit that first stitch. Slip my marker. I'm gonna hold my yarn in my other hand since I know you guys like to see it over here. I have to remind myself of that. So I knit my first stitch, and now I have to do my knit front and back. And if you remember, that means we're going to go into the stitch just like we're knitting, yarn over our needle, come out the stitch, extend it, swivel, and come into the back leg of that same stitch, yarn over, come out, and off. Now I'm going to knit to within 1 stitch of my marker, do my knit front and back, slip my marker, knit 1, slip my marker, knit front and back, knit to 1 stitch before my marker, knit front and back, slip my marker, knit 1, right? This is very similar to what we have been doing all along, correct? No changes here. The big thing to remember that we're doing right now is that we are moving our stitches from one needle to another needle so that we can get a different size. So by this point, you guys know how to knit. You know how to work your increases here at the beginning and in the center and at the end, okay? Because you've been doing that all through the first section. None of that changes in this section. You still maintain the knit front and back at the wingspan and the knit front and back down the center every other right side row. So that does not change. What changes in this section is actually the 1 row of purl. So let's go ahead and see how that is done. I'm going to move this out of the way. So what I've been working on, I'm going to move it out of the way. And in the essence or the interest, I guess, of time, I am bringing in just a little swatch that I have worked up and put some arbitrary marking points in this. And I shouldn't say they're arbitrary. I put a marker at the beginning, at the end to signify the same stitches that are on the actual shawl. And I've put markers in the center so that we can signify that. That way I don't have to waste waste a lot of time working on that shawl to show you what I need to show you, okay? So this swatch right here represents the first row of the stripe pattern. That blue is my color C. So that's the first row of my stripe pattern completed. So when I turn my work, and it's time for me to go ahead and do my row 2, I'm going to follow along in the pattern. Now, I do want to point out that as you have switched needles now, your shorter needle that is no longer in play, it no longer has stitches on it, go ahead and go store that away because you aren't going to use that again at this point. We're going to use that again at the very end of the pattern, okay? So just put it away. We're going to only work with your longer needle. So make sure you're grabbing the opposite end of the same needle that all of your stitches are on. So I'm on row 2 of the stripe pattern, and I'm going to go ahead and knit my first stitch, just like we've been doing. Slip my marker, knit front and back, so knit in the front, knit in the back, and now I have to purl to the last 2 stitches. So let's pay attention here. As you look down here, I just finished my knit front and back, and my yarn is in back of the needles. Before I can purl, I've got to be sure that I move my yarn between my needles to the front. Can you see that? My yarn was back here because I was knitting. I've got to bring it between my needles and to the front before I can begin to purl. Now when I purl, I take my right hand needle and I'm going to come from the right side to the left side of that stitch. Can you see that? It's the next stitch on my left hand needle. I go from the right side to the left side, yarn over, and when I yarn over, I want to make sure I go over top, okay? So I'm going to show you that one more time. I'm in. I'm going to yarn over top of my needle. If my needles, if I hold them like this and it's pointing up at 12 o'clock, I'm coming around my needle, so I'm going counterclockwise. Now I take that stitch and I pop it out of my stitch that's on my needle and off. So I go in, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. Now I'm going to in, around, out, off. Slip my marker. In, around, out, off. Slip my marker. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, and that would be off, correct? Oh, look at that. Do you see? There's a marker right there. So that stitch actually should be a knit front and back. So I am going to go ahead and put that stitch back on my needle. So I'm going to undo it. And I've got to do a knit front and back. Now, when I do a knit front and back, I have to take my yarn, go between my needles, and do my knit in the front and the back. So my yarn is twisted there. I'm going to turn it around so that it's correct. There we go. So I'm in, around, out, extend, go into the back leg, yarn over, out, off, slip my marker, and knit 1. Oh, we just finished a purl row. Not so bad, right? I know that yours is going to take a lot longer because you have a lot more stitches than I do on my little swatch here, but you know how to do this. If you find you need a little extra help with the purling, we do have a video right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. You can go and it's completely dedicated to just purling. So you could go check it out and see me teaching you once again how to do the purl stitches. So when I turn my work at this point, I am on row 3 of my striped stitch pattern. And for row 3, all we're going to do is we're going to change colors. First off, we have to change to color A. We're going to increase in our first stitch after our marker, increase in our first stitch before our last marker, and in the next row we'll do the same thing. So the next 2 rows, whenever you're using color A, there is no center increase. How cool is that? Like, that's so easy to remember. Let me say that one more time. Because of this striped stitch pattern, whenever you're on a color A, you will not be doing any center increases, okay? You will only do your center increases the first row that you complete after you do your last row of color A. So it's the first row you do with your color C, you will do your center increases. So now all of a sudden your center increases are going to be much more easy to remember. I don't know if you're like me, but I had a hard time trying to remember when it was every other right side row down the center. And so this will make it really easy. Let me show you what I mean here. Instead of cutting this yarn, I don't want to cut my color C, okay? Remember when I said I wanted to carry it up the side? I am going to go ahead and I'm going to leave that color there, and I'm going to grab my color A, which in this case is white. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tie it onto this one, to the blue, to my color C. And I'm going to go on in my pattern. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work my next 2 rows, and then we'll fast forward and we'll go to where it's starting my row 1 again with my color C, so you can see how to carry up the yarn along the side. Let's go ahead and do these next 2 rows. Okay, I just finished my row 4, and it's time for me to go ahead and begin my row 1 again for my repeat. And to do that, what I'm going to do is, I know it looks really crazy, you have all these tails of yarn going on over here, but they won't be that way forever, okay? You'll have some room here where we're just going to carry the yarn up, and that's what we're going to start doing right now. So I'm going to show you how to do that. With my white color, I'm just going to let it drop down. I'm not going to do anything with it, okay? But I'm going to go back, I'm going to grab my blue color, so my color C, and I'm going to go ahead and begin working my row 1 with my color C. Now you can tell here my color C is coming up from the 2 rows below when it was down there and I was working with it, right? So the biggest thing to be sure of right here is that you are not pulling your color C really tight. So when you knit that first stitch, okay, you don't want to pull it really tight and tighten those things up. If you do that, that will make one side of your shawl a lot more tight than the other side. So you just want to make sure that it's a real comfortable, loose is probably not a good word for me to use, a comfortable stitch. You want to make sure it's not super tight, and you want to make sure it's not like crazy loose, because then you'll have loosey-goosey ends. You just want to have that comfortable balance there, okay? So you knit the first stitch, and I just carried the yarn up from the 2 rows below, and then I carry on in pattern. And because this is the first row after my color A was used, I automatically know that in this row, I'm going to do a knit front and back increase when I get to my center markers. You see what I mean about having that be something that's super useful, and you won't have to forget when it's time to increase your stitches. So here I am, I'm at my 1 stitch before that marker. I go ahead, I knit my front and my back, slip my marker, if I can get over to it, slip my marker, knit the next stitch, slip my marker, and then do my knit front and back on this side, because remember the sides of our shawl are symmetrical. And then I'm going to go ahead and knit down to 1 stitch before my marker. Now, what I really love about this particular stripe stitch pattern is that it breaks up like the monotony of just doing knit stitches, right? You get to go ahead and throw in that random purl row, and then we're also going to do our color changes every 2 rows. And so that makes things super easy. Coupling that with the fact that I get to carry up my yarn through the majority of this section, that makes me a happy camper. So let's take a look at what we have here. You can see that I have my increases. Let me move all these tails out of the way. All these tails, crazy. I have my increases going on down here, down the sides, like I have been the whole pattern. Remember at the beginning, I told you, you will be doing those increases every single row down the sides of your shawl to make sure the wingspan is really wide. And then I just worked my knit front and back increase here at the center stitches. So my 2 markers there that are either side of center, I worked my increases right there because it was the first row I did after my color change, which is always my row 1. I would do that center increase, but it's easy for me to remember that it's the first row after I do that color change. Now I'm going to bring in another shawl here I've been working on. I have so many shawls I've been working on just so I can show you what this section is going to look like when it's complete and all the tails are going on. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about yarn management. Okay, so let's take a look at a shawl that I actually have in progress. Yes, I have 2 shawls in progress. I have the white and coral and turquoise color, and then I have this one, which is a light heather, charcoal, and berry. So let's take a look. As we take a look at this one, you can see I have my color changes and my yarn down here at the edge of section 1 where all the color changes happened. But then as I move into section 2, I only have the color cut off in these sections, okay? I don't have it cut off every 2 rows. Why is that? Well, the thing is, as you start working this section, you'll notice that, you know, color C, color A, color C, color A, color C, color A, color C, color A, color C, and then we go to color B, right? And then we go back to A, so C, A, B, A, and then we C, A, you know, so on and so forth. So what I did is I cut my yarn on the last color A before I had to go to color B, and then I rejoined when I had to go back to color A. Does that make sense? So having said that, my color C is carried along the side the whole way because it is still every 2 rows. The only one that is not every 2 rows is when I have to go from color A to color B, right? Because in between all of those, it's still color C. Color C gets a lot of play going on here. So when you are working along and you are trying to figure out when to cut your yarn or how to do your yarn management, I want to tell you, you want to cut your yarn when you're getting ready to change. So at the end of the stripe section, when it's time to switch to color B, you will cut color A, rejoin color B, and then cut color B and rejoin color A all the way down till it's time to change that up again. Okay, this whole section, once again, I can look at it on here. Yes, it's still on the needles. Like I said, it's a work in progress. I have 3 mini sections within this section. Okay, so that's how I did this. I did 3 mini sections within this section. That's the only way that I'm able to, once again, not bite off more than I can chew. I know that if I do 9 rows a day for those 7 days between the section releases, you will get this section done. Now, having said that, as the shawl becomes bigger and bigger, it is going to have more and more stitches. So those sections will take longer and longer. So if you find that you have a little bit of extra time one day to get more than 9 rows in, I encourage you to go ahead and get more than 9 rows in that day, because it might be that towards the end here, when you're in the 3rd mini section, you don't have the full time to finish it, and you're so grateful that you took the chance to do more rows at the beginning. Am I making sense there? I sure hope I am. I'm really trying to help you guys out with maintaining with the cow. I also want to say that if you are going slower, say you're not done with section 1 yet, and you're just like, oh, I want to give up. I'm such a slow knitter. Don't give up, okay? There is still the Facebook group going on. We're all there to help you and encourage you along. And there's not a race with this, okay? You're okay. If you need to take a little bit more time to get through section 1, absolutely okay, all right? It's okay. Do this cowl at your own pace. I want it to be something that's relaxing and encouraging and exciting for you. It is not something that I want you to really be stressed about and have it be another big deadline on your plate, because Lord knows we have enough deadlines, okay? So this is your homework. Let's see here. First thing you're going to do is take a look down here at the sample shawl. You're going to transfer over to a longer needle if you have one. You'll begin working your first row of your stripe pattern. Your second row of the stripe pattern is where purls are introduced. And once again, I showed you how to do a purl stitch. If you need more instructions for that, there is a link down in the video notes down below. You can go check that out and get more instructions on how to do purl if what I showed you here in the video was not enough. So that row 2 of the striped pattern is the only row that we do purls, because then the next 2 rows are garter stitch using color A, which we know how to do because that's what we just did on the whole first section. And then once you get past those 2 rows, it's time to switch back to your color C. And remember, that first row you do after you finish color A is when you do those increases down the center spine of your shawl. So now you don't have to worry about, am I on an increase row down the center? Am I not on an increase row down the center? You have a really great visual clue with the color changes here when that happens. I love that. I love it when things like that happen in the pattern. I hope you guys are really enjoying this knit along. I know that I am. The Facebook group is absolutely amazing. I love watching all of your shawl progress, you guys. The colors you chose are fantastic. Seeing how they're all coming together and the progress from section 1 is so inspiring. It makes me want to jump in and start even another shawl. I don't think I should. Maybe I should go ahead and start in for the next knit along, try and get that start planned out for you guys, right? Do me a favor, if you've watched this video and you've enjoyed it and liked the information, please hit that like button. As my kids say, smash that like button so that everybody knows that you enjoyed this video today. It's really important that you do that. And if you want to leave me a comment, I would love to hear that as well. Other than that, go ahead and finish this entire section, 9 rows a day, and you will be ready for the section for seed stitch. So it's the very last section. But the good news is it's not very long, okay? It's just a couple, it's just such a minute section. Actually, it is the size of a mini section of section 2. That's a whole lot of sections. I've said section a lot here. That's okay. So finish section 2. We will jump in and do section 3. After you finish section 2, you have completed more than half of this shawl. And so section 3 and the final attached I-cord bind off is going to be absolute cake. So this is the meat of it. This is the big chunk that you want to get through. So take your time. You can do this, I promise. Come and join the Facebook group if you haven't had a chance to do that. Show us what you're working on and take a look at some of the other stuff that people are working on, and smash that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe. I'm Marley Bird for redheart.com, and you are watching and participating in the Marley Bird Garter Stitch Knit Along. Talk to you guys later. Bye.